Thank you all again so much for joining for the kickoff for the Illinois Work-Based Learning Innovation Network, or IWIN, as we have so formally called it with an acronym there. Just really excited to kick this work off today. I know there's a lot of familiar faces on the call. There's a few new faces on the call, and work with a lot of you on your work-based learning efforts, and are excited to bring you all together through this network to really share those learnings and resources and best practices and materials. So we have a lot of really great presentations for you all here today. But would first just love to see who's here in the room. Please write your name, title, organization. You can put this all in the chat here for today. I know we have looks like we have about 43 people on, so won't take the time to go around and say this out loud. But please write in the chat your name, title, and organization. And it's a very different Halloween this year, but would love to hear what your favorite Halloween costume has been. This can be all the way from being a child. It might even be something you wish you could dress up as one day, but the money and the time to make it might not be there. So please take some time to do that in the chat here so we can get a sense of who's in the room. Also, just some logistics. If you can please make sure to mute your computers and your phones if you're connected through audio that way during the presentation. We are going to have time after each presentation for Q&A. And also throughout, we very much heavily use the chat feature. So please use the chat to provide any comments or any questions throughout. This really is meant to be a space where we're sharing learnings and sharing resources. So as somebody is saying something during a presentation, during Q&A, or what I might be sharing, if you think of a resource, if you think of, a hot tip you'd like to share with the group, please feel free to put that in the chat. I will be sending out the presentation today as a recording, and I'll also send out the chat as well if there's resources and information that's been included in there. Oh, Baby Yoda is a big one, Lindsay. That's the, ooh, a giant sloth. I like giant sloths. I know, my daughter's 3 and doesn't really know about Halloween. So I'm kind of just sticking with pajamas this year and not buying an outfit. But awesome, these are fun. Thanks, Kathleen. The Einstein Smarty Pants, a honeybee. Yeah, I think my favorite costume might have been when I was a mermaid, but I've lived in Chicago my whole entire life, so you can't really be like a real mermaid. You have to wear a turtleneck with the whole mermaid outfit and everything like that. So it was a cold weather mermaid. It tends to snow or just be very cold here in Chicago. But thank you all again for joining. As you can see, we have folks in this network and this group from a lot of different spaces. There really is, the space here for this network is really to engage all the different stakeholders who are involved in work-based learning. Because as you all are familiar with, it takes a whole team to pull this off and to really get meaningful work-based learning experiences for students. So please continue to introduce yourselves if you haven't done so already, but I will move us forward here. The plan for today, we're going to take some time. A lot of you might be familiar with this. I also know there's some new faces in the room as well, though, just to do an overview of some state frameworks and also some best practices in virtual work-based learning. This is a network for work-based learning that will extend beyond the virtual space. But we know that this year, this is a very high need for communities. So a lot of our focus and our conversations this year will be on that virtual space. And as we move forward into a hybrid space, into a combo, a virtual, hybrid, fully in-person, work-based learning is really going to take on a lot of different forms as we move forward. We have 3 different presentations today. So each time that we meet as a network, there will be Illinois community sharing what they're up to. Also going to bring in some national examples as well that seem to be fitting the needs of this network and the group and what you all have expressed as something you want to learn more about. So we have a national example today out of Washington State. If we have time, and I'm hoping we have at least 5 to 10 minutes, but if we have some really robust Q&A for the presentations, then we can leave the time for that. But would love to have you all just randomly assigned into breakout groups and reflect on the day, what insights you took away, how you think you might utilize these within your space. And then we'll have some closing and next steps to move forward, along with some feedback from you all about how this network continues to progress. But first, I would like to introduce John Furr, our Executive Director of Education Systems Center, who's going to do a welcome and just give you a brief background about Ed Systems and the work here within the network.
Great. Thanks, Heather. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm John Furr, the Executive Director of Education Systems Center. We're really thrilled to have all of these partners on the line today and to be part of this work as we launch this network. I know that many of you are longtime partners of ours and are familiar with Ed Systems. For those who are new, just to give you an overview, Education Systems Center at Northern Illinois University, we have our mission to shape and strengthen education and workforce systems that prepare more young people for productive careers and lives. And we have three primary focus areas around college and career pathways, which includes not only the courses, but really importantly, the work-based learning related efforts to support young people to move from middle school on to secondary and through post-secondary to the workforce. We do a lot of work around bridges to post-secondary, including both early college credit as well as transitional courses, and a significant focus on data. And within all those areas, we're doing work at the state level, and I know that we have some of our state agency partners who are on the line today, who we work closely with on different state policies and programs. But we importantly focus a lot of our work on our different community networks through the Illinois 60 by 25 network, as well as really the emerging network for the IWIN group, bringing together those community partners who are driving these important efforts. And just for the next slide, one important framing for Ed Systems overall, I think for all of us, how we're thinking about the impacts of this year and for our focus is that we are really squarely focusing our work within IWIN and across all of our initiatives in this lens and work for advancing racial equity. We've been taking a lot of time as a team over the course of this year to make sure that racial equity is even more tangible within our work at the community level and also within our state policy work, and trying to make sure that as we are supporting and beginning to influence systems that are impacting students and families, that we are both listening to those stakeholders, that we're engaging their reflections on the work that we're doing, and making sure that we're measuring our work so that we're ensuring that as we're engaging in these efforts, that wherever possible, we're focusing on lessening the racial equities that are part of our systems and part of our policies. So this will be a framing for our focus within the IWIN work and how we're looking to support work-based learning related efforts. And we're excited to bring you all along within these work as well and to partner with you and to learn from you as we think about this overarching goal. And so that kind of brings us to the goal again that we have for the IWIN network. I mean, one is that we know that there are a number of innovative models for work-based learning that are happening throughout the state, where many of you again do have that same focus around how are you promoting access to work-based learning in ways that can help build the social capital for particularly Black and Latinx and other students who have not been served historically well by the systems within your communities. And so what we want to be able to do is to identify and highlight those models and to make sure that you can learn from each other and that we can connect that back up to state policy. And certainly we obviously understand within the current environment with COVID, there's a strong focus on virtual work-based learning systems, and that will be a strong initial focus for us within our work. But we're also really looking at, again, virtual systems as opportunities as we get out of this current public health crisis to better connect students to work-based learning activities that were before where there were transportation barriers, where there may have been difficulties with students being able to maybe work a part-time job along with more meaningful engagement with employers or different work-based learning experiences that we think for the long term that what we're learning this year can carry on beyond that. Again, as we think about this, we really want to focus on the equitable access to work-based learning systems. So how are we building social capital and connections and mentors and work with employers, particularly looking from the racial equity lens for our Black and Latinx students throughout the state, and also building connections among communities to share those best practices and learnings and resources. And last but certainly not least, part of our goal is as we're having these discussions and thinking about the work, where do we need to look at state policy changes that can better support work-based learning, and where is there a need for additional state support systems that can help this effort as well. So with those overarching goals, again, really excited to dive into this work with all of you and very excited for all the folks who are on the line today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Heather to go into more detail around the work-based learning framing.
Wonderful. Thank you, John. And thank you for that framing here. So I'm Heather Penzak. I've been the one mostly communicating with you all, or if this invite was forwarded to you, hello. I'm a policy and program manager with Education Systems Center, and just a very brief background on myself, kind of why I'm in this space of work-based learning. I'm a former high school science teacher. Sometimes I really miss my freshman biology class, and I think a lot about teachers every day and how I would be teaching that freshman biology class right now remotely. So definitely teachers are top of mind right now for me. But recently, before my role here with Education Systems Center, I was managing a high school internship program here in Chicago called Urban Alliance. It's a 10-month internship program where students are placed at employers across the city, and they work Monday through Thursday and have ongoing professional development on Friday. So I have very much been in all the different spaces of employer engagement, supporting students, developing those essential skills to prepare them for work-based learning, and doing those different reflective pieces along the way and skill development. So I've been in the weeds on work-based learning and definitely have an understanding of what that looks like. So I'm going to spend some time here in just a brief moment because I do want to move to our presenters and have them share their information, but just to get us all in the room on the same page, some state frameworks and also some general best practices that we've been hearing from communities and from our own experience in virtual work-based learning. So one of the big drivers of a lot of the work that we do is the Post-Secondary and Workforce Readiness Act. This was signed in 2016 into law, and there's 4 big components here. If you're familiar, there's the Post-Secondary and Career Expectations and PACE framework, and that outlines different activities that students should be doing as they progress along grade levels to prepare for their post-secondary programs and career options. There's also the scaling of 12th grade transitional courses. So transitional math, which has been being implemented for a while, and then also transitional English, which is soon to be adopted and also being implemented in high schools across the state as well. The one that we're going to focus on here are the college and career pathway endorsements on high school diplomas, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. And there's also the pilot of competency-based high school graduation requirements. This is another space where, similar to this network, we're bringing together communities who are doing competency-based education to share their learnings and practices with one another and really create that robust system for what that looks like. So the College and Career Pathway Endorsement Framework, this is a lot to read on this page. If you're not familiar with it, it is linked as a resource within this presentation. But there are 4 kind of main components that outline what it means to receive this endorsement framework. And really what this is doing is it's creating those minimum expectations for the exposure and the experience that a student should have to really be college and career ready. So the different experiences and professional learning that they'll have, the different career focused instructional courses that they'll take to, again, continue to grapple with deeply what it is that they want to do when they graduate high school. I know there's a lot of spaces where students will submit their plan or submit what they're doing after high school. And it's so important that they engage in all these different activities to have a true understanding of that. Our focus is going to be in this professional learning space, and I'm going to dive in there a little bit deeply here with you all. There are 7 main endorsement areas in the College and Career Pathway Endorsement. Each of these endorsement areas can encompass a lot of different career options and activities, but these are the 7 broad areas that we will focus on for the College and Career Pathway Endorsement. And within these endorsement areas, and broadly, there are essential employability and technical competencies. So again, this document is linked as a resource for you, and I know this might feel quick if this is all new to you. We will continue to dive into these things within each network and how they apply to what we're discussing. But within this, there have been identified 10 cross-sector essential employability competency statements. So these are applicable to all industry areas, regardless of whether a student is going right to further education after high school or going into a career. These are those things that students need to be successful. These competency statements were developed through diverse stakeholder groups. So again, educators, community-based organizations, post-secondary institutions, employers, industry experts, they were all at the table when these were being created. So you can see a few of them outlined here for you. Within each of those endorsement areas that I showed earlier, there's also 10 technical competency statements for them outlined. Again, these are kind of those minimum competencies of what should be covered. There are plenty more that you can do, but through these diverse stakeholder group meetings, really have identified these top 10 that a student should be exposed to and aware of and be able to demonstrate if they're going to be seen as technically competent within that industry or within that endorsement area. Also defined as a state framework, and these definitions are within the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary that I'll actually show here in a moment too, is a work-based learning continuum. So one piece of work-based learning is that students need to be moved along the continuum. You don't want to have an individual or a student going right into something like an internship if they've never experienced some other experiences. I feel like I was saying the same word choice there, which I did. If they haven't done other experiences in work-based learning before they get to something intensive like an internship, you're really setting a student up to not feel successful or confident, and there might be frustration with the employer, right? And so really thinking about how do you bring a student along from career awareness, where they're starting to get exposure to different industries, career exploration, where they're engaging in things like guest speakers or job site visits, moving into a team-based challenge, which is very similar to project-based learning. So they're diving deeply into a real-world problem. They're finding solutions. It's an open-ended problem. They're working closely with a mentor who's in the industry, is an industry expert, and really working through as a team what it means to solve that problem for the industry. And then moving forward into something more robust like a career development experience, which would be an internship or like a co-op program, a supervised agricultural experience, and then moving into even more intensive experiences like a pre-apprenticeship, youth apprenticeship, or apprenticeship. And as you can see along the bottom here in that green bar, really there needs to be this increasing intensity of employer engagement. So initially, a lot of this is happening within the school or the community-based organization space, building that student up and preparing them to engage with employers in a meaningful way, but also working with employers so that they will engage with the students in a meaningful way as they go along this continuum. So I've included the definitions here. Again, these are in the Illinois Career Pathways Dictionary. And what I would say about these definitions is you are probably already doing a lot of these things. Maybe there's a few tweaks that you might do in order to meet these requirements within the endorsement framework or to meet the requirements of this definition. But really they're just outlining what that minimum expectation is for quality. So if a student is going to engage in a career exploration like a guest speaker, then they should really be able to engage directly with employers. They shouldn't be just watching videos and writing down their thoughts and questions, but they should be involved in some form of live Q&A with that employer and able to ask questions right in that moment and hear from them. And again, build that muscle of what it means to talk to an industry professional. In a team-based challenge, that problem should, again, be really relating to employers within that area or a common problem to employers across the nation. And then that mentoring really needs to be there. And it says mentoring from adults with expertise.
Indie boxes and
I think there's a little bit of feedback. If y'all can just
lotion, candies, etc. for every resident of the Morningside.
Hi, everyone. Quick reminder, if you can just please mute your phone and computers. There's a little bit of background. But that team-based challenge really should have mentoring from adults with expertise. And one thing I would say there, what we see some communities doing is sometimes this is an employer, sometimes this is even someone from the post-secondary institution that you might be partnering with. Adults with expertise can take on a lot of different forms. I know even in this space of COVID, spaces have really started even reaching out to parents who might have expertise in an industry area and would be willing to engage with students, those parents or family members. And then a career development experience really is a bucket term for something like an internship or a co-op, which I mentioned earlier. But this is a supervised work experience, and it should really have these 6 components. Some of the biggest ones that I think people always grapple with when they're thinking through implementing a career development experience is the third, how they'll provide compensation or educational credit to the participant. A lot of these you'll see them doing, a summer program, and it might have stipends or hourly wages. Or you might see this being as a semester credit program, the co-op class. And then also number 6, where it would take place for a minimum of 60 total cumulative hours. Again, different spaces get creative with what this looks like, and sometimes they'll do like 2 micro internships over a spring break, so 2 30-hour experiences. Before we kind of move into here on virtual work-based learning, I just want to have the moment where we are really planning into the unknown constantly. As we work with communities across the state, virtual work-based learning is a new space for many of us, and priorities are shifting basically every week, every day, every hour, every minute. And so what do we do? And this is a big goal of the network, and it's work that we've been doing too with our Great Lakes partnerships to start to prototype and think through what they could do to design some virtual work-based learning. And so really it's thinking through, how do you start with a question? What is the need? Who are the students? What are you trying to accomplish by incorporating some virtual work-based learning? Who are you trying to serve? Who needs access? What classes maybe need some more engagement pieces in them where you can bring in some industry partners? And then start to, again, in this network is going to be a big piece here, gathering stories, learning about what others may have experienced and done. But really, ultimately, moving forward in an idea, moving forward in a plan that's well thought out and intentional to meet that question or meet that need. But then really constantly monitoring that progress, managing chaos, which it seems like some days are just all chaos, by closely observing the changing conditions, responding in the moment, hearing from people within your space, understanding their bandwidth, their capacity, their needs, and just to really be intentional about capturing your learning along the way to assess, how your prototype or how your initiative has ended and what next steps you need to do. Again, I think it's a big piece here and something we've seen a lot of communities that the initiatives they're taking to implement virtual work-based learning are really proving some positive outcomes for a broader set of students and seeing that they can serve more students. And so really thinking through how do they continue to incorporate those experiences once we're back to quote unquote normal, right? And we're having regular in-person classes, but how can they continue to do that virtual work-based learning? And so just a piece here again too, to set us in the stage here is why should individuals and industry partners engage in work-based learning? There's a lot of different reasons you can say. The few that I've included here are really having that for individuals, the engagement and authentic tasks that help them connect to classroom learning. I think this is even more important now when we're worried about engagement and worried about students attending classes. And so how do we bring the outside world and those industry partners into the classroom? And also really determining, engaging deeply in work-based learning is a really strong indicator for yourself if you like that career interest area. And it's a good result if a student or an individual decides that they don't like that at all. I think back to when I was in college, and some of you know the story, I interned for the Shedd Aquarium here in Chicago. I thought I wanted to be a marine biologist, and it wasn't great. I didn't really like smelling like fish and like feeding fish all day and just doing that work. And I really wish I would have done that sooner, right? I very much value my biology degree. I think it shaped my brain, but I think I could have gotten started on this education path a little bit sooner had I interned at someplace like the Shedd Aquarium in high school. Also within work-based learning, a big piece of this is that social capital that John referred to earlier. Those resources and that information that you get just from being exposed and connecting to a network of professionals and industry experts. It is so often that it's about who you know that you are able to access information. And then for partners and for individuals and for educational institutions, community-based organizations, they really start to develop this collaborative relationship where you can align needs, supports, and opportunities. Instead of everybody kind of like pointing a finger at one another and trying to figure out like who needs to do what, and how can it be done, and who should own it, you can really start to form some collaborative relationships. And relationships really are key to making things happen. So would love to hear from you all too. What is your why for work-based learning if it hasn't been captured here, and to put that response in the chat. So just to move forward here a little bit, I'll be done in just a moment and turn it over to our presenter here from Washington State. But like we've discussed before, virtual work-based learning can really be an opportunity designed for sustainability and equity. It can address needs like transportation, which I know is a common need across communities, regardless of urban, suburban, rural. You don't really need transportation at this point, right? There is the technology issue that pops up now as one problem is quote unquote solved, another tends to arise, right? And that's another a barrier for equity and equitable access to work-based learning. But there's also the distance, the size, and the type of partnerships. You're not worried so much about how far away they are, where they're located. There's some partners who I know as I've talked to communities and even in my own experience where they didn't have a physical location. They did work 100% remotely, but they always really wanted to take on a high school intern. And we didn't have necessarily the framework or the system, the structure set up to do that. And now we would be able to. There's also very much a way to address diverse student needs for support and access. One of these I think about a lot is being able to be more intentional and thoughtful as you are assigning mentors to the participants, to your students, the individuals. You can really be thoughtful about matching them to a mentor who reflects their diverse identities. As we've seen with students, I know when I would have a student go into a work site, they might get a mentor who's great, but doesn't necessarily reflect them. And they would go find a mentor within that employer who does. And so they would actually end up having 2 different mentors that they worked with. And so it's a really great opportunity to be more intentional about that because you have a bit more flexibility. There's a few just essential elements. I think a lot of people always wonder, well, virtual work-based learning, what do I do? What is a quality virtual work-based learning? And it's the same as all essential elements and outcomes of work-based learning. Are the students being able to enhance their skill and knowledge in a program of study or career interest area? Are they developing essential employability competencies? And are they really having authentic quality engagement and being able to interact and network with industry professionals one-on-one? Virtual work-based learning, the biggest kind of things here to take away is that since we all are at home, and I think I've noticed this for myself for sure, is that there is an increased focus on individual self-reflection and accountability. So however those structures can be built in to really guide individuals through the reflection process, how they're learning, what they are learning, what they need, if they're missing anything, if something is unclear, and also helping to set up frameworks and check-ins and a regular cadence to how they can be held accountable for different projects and tasks that they're doing. And definitely intentional distance mentoring. You know, when you're in a space and you're in person, it's really easy to pop into different rooms and ask questions. But now I know our former high school intern, now turned junior policy associate with our team here, we have regular check-ins every week, and it's just a really great space to see how you're doing, what are you up to, what questions do you have, and then check in along that throughout the week. And then just this consideration, providing opportunities to address multiple levels of technology access, moving from a 0 where they have no access and very limited interactions to level 3 where they have great access to technology and so they can have really meaningful interactions. And so provided here is just an example of what that could look like as you think through the different levels. Ed Systems as a team does a lot of work as well with CEPI, Scaling Education Pathways in Illinois. And as we've been working with those communities, we've been thinking through how to adapt to a virtual space and still offer the work-based learning opportunities within that education pathway. One last thing here before we move to our presenters is that Illinois is also doing a Practera pilot right now. It's a customizable technology-enabled platform I know some of you all are familiar with. And we're doing this through a partnership with Northeastern University out of Boston. And there's a lot of cool things that Illinois communities are doing. A few of those communities are on the line here today. And as they move more into implementation and gather learnings, they will definitely be sharing that with this network. But any virtual work-based learning platform, I think what these communities are doing through Practera is going to be applicable to other platforms as well, about how you can think through ensuring equity and expanding access. Some communities are actually embedding work-based learning within a dual credit course to create some regional support, and then using it to support a team-based challenge or career development experience. So it's a really exciting opportunity, and we'll continue to have updates about how communities are utilizing that platform. So kind of a question here for you all as we move and shift to our presentation here from Washington is just if you could share with us how you've been innovative or what you're interested in adapting that you currently do or what you want to create to support virtual work-based learning, that would be great to hear. And again, any resources, information, or best practices as you have grappled with virtual work-based learning, or as you wondered even how to begin in virtual work-based learning, would love to hear that in the chat here. And before I move really quickly, Carl, are there any questions for me popping up in the chat? I haven't had a chance to look, but I do see it blinking there at the top.
Folks have just been sharing why they're passionate about work-based learning. And there are no questions so far, but some great stuff happening in the chat.
Wonderful. Yes, please chat away. I love it. Thank you, Carl. And I will turn it over here to our next presenter, or our first presenter.
Well, good morning, everybody. And I'm Maud Dadon. I am the executive leader of Career Connect Washington. And I'm going to spend just a couple minutes giving you the context of who we are and what we do. And then I'll leap mostly into the virtual learning space, which is something we've enhanced this year, obviously, because of our friend COVID, our friendly COVID friend. I wanted to just, before I do that, say, Heather, I'd really love the stripy shirt and stripy background combination. I mean, that is really something, I gotta say. You got it going. You really got it going.
Thank you. I have some ghosts hanging above me too that my daughter made.
Love it. And the chat, I just want to echo what Carl was saying. You know, the things folks were throwing in there recently about why they do this work just really resonate so much with me. We really find when we go out and visit students, which we used to be able to do pre-pandemic much more, obviously, and see them in these roles, that it's just a win-win. It's good for the student. They get agency in the world, and it's so wonderful to see employers begin to light up and say, we had no idea what a young person could bring to our role, to our work. So anyhow, thanks for the work you do. I think it's awesome too, and I share that feeling. Okay, so let's keep going to the next slide. And next slide. So a few years back, our governor, Jay Inslee, had observed that in our state, only 40% of our students get past high school to attain a credential or a degree. And the economy really required 70% of students to do so. Interestingly, this is pre-pandemic data. We're just updating this data now. And it looks like the number on the right is probably closer to 80% right now. You probably have observed in your state that the jobs that have not suffered as much are jobs that basically require a STEM education of some kind or have some kind of credential or degree behind them. And those who've been hit worse in this pandemic and lost their jobs and so on, and they're not coming back, are people with a high school degree or less. And so this isn't going away. In fact, it looks like it's being exacerbated at the moment, and we'll see how this all shakes out, obviously. But having observed this, we're not a big, huge state. And the idea was, well, can't we do a better job of really connecting our young people to employers? Employers were lamenting they couldn't find talent. So what the heck? I mean, we have all these young people. Why don't we try to make that connection? So our vision in Career Connect Washington is that every young adult would have multiple pathways towards essentially economic self-sufficiency, life fulfillment, and that this would be embedded in our education system. So all students would have this opportunity to make choices about how, not whether, but how to advance their education into post-secondary. Okay, so we did a big strategic planning exercise, listened to thousands of people across the state. And let's go one more slide, Heather. I think we have the 3-step continuum in here, but maybe not. Yes, here it is. What we heard, we bucketed what we heard was already going on. So we knew that we had a lot of career exploration, and similar to Illinois, we've put labels on these things to try to get a common language going across the state. So a career exploration is elementary, middle school, career fairs, worksite tours, etc. Then we heard a lot about really robust CTE and skill center programs and summer internships, and we bucketed those into something we call career prep, high school level, something that is a deeper exposure to a single kind of sector. But it's not really a skill builder. It's much more deeper exposure. And that leads to, hopefully, the decision on the part of students to do career launch, which if we go back a slide, sorry, Heather, is a meaningful, high quality on-the-job experience. It is paid. It is usually employer supervised on site. It's aligned with real classroom. It produces a competitive candidate for a real job, and it provides a valuable credential beyond the high school diploma, either a degree a year's worth of college credit or an industry recognized credential that has real value. It has to be employer validated. It is not just, we know there's thousands of industry credentials, but we need to have a few employers step up and say, I would hire this student with this credential. Career Launch encompasses registered apprenticeship. We have a lot of registered apprenticeship already in our state. So if there is a registered apprenticeship, it is automatically endorsed as Career Launch. But if it is a program that's not already through that system, we have an endorsement process. It has to be a high quality program, validated on 2 counts. One, truly in-demand job, truly the curriculum has been developed side by side with employers, leading the way, talking about skills and competencies required. And that academic learning has to be, as much as we can make it, transferable and valuable to the students so they have a leg up going into college. If they decide after this experience they want to go on and do other things, fantastic. If they want to go into a job, fantastic. But we want to make sure they have lots of options, that it's essentially a permeable system. Okay, so you can flip forward 2 slides now, Heather. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, and let me just, one last thing I should say. We did a planning year, and then we put all this into legislation in April of 2019. Our state legislature passed the framework and gave us about $35 million actually to implement year 1 and 2 of the system. We're just finished with year 1. We've hit all of the goals that we had. Our big aspirational North Star is that 60% of our students in a decade will choose Career Launch to get on to college and career. Why do we think that's going to happen? Because the demand is there. We've done a lot of research with students and parents, and never have I seen anything, especially now in our state, that people agree on more, that this makes sense, that it is high time that we start braiding the pathways between education and employment a lot earlier. And not that we're trying to make little mini, tech executives out of 5-year-olds, because some people have a fear about that. It's that we want these kids to have the exposure to make good decisions about their life, and that they want to direct their education as much as possible towards the things that they care about. And, young people respond by just saying, look, if I could get paid and be on the job and get a meaningful, become a meaningful candidate for a real job and get college credit, why wouldn't I do that? So we really have seen an incredible surge in demand for this. Okay, so that's Career Connect, and we are a collective action effort. I work for the governor, but I sit outside of state government with a little team that coaches and advises him on how to build the system. All of the key players are scattered across, first of all, state agencies, very, very engaged. We have 9 regional networks, and we have at this stage, about 25 intermediaries that are building programs. We do that all through competitive grant awards. It's a performance and outcome driven system, but it is a collective action. So anyone who takes the mantle and says, I really want to do this program, I'm willing to put myself into writing a grant application and demonstrating employer interest, they're a candidate. We've been able to award about 1 out of 4 of our grant applications, given the funding we've got. We're trying to sustain that funding going forward. Okay, so the pandemic hit, and my first reaction was, oh my gosh, my biggest fear that this whole thing, which had great momentum and was going places, was going to have a hard time because we would lose momentum. But then my second thought was, wait a second, let's look at the data for young people in the pandemic. And I think all of you have seen this, but young people have been hit twice as hard as adults. Their unemployment rates are twice the level of adults. If you're a young person, you've either lost your job, you've had your hours curtailed, or you're getting less pay. They've cut your pay. It is almost universal. So let's just say there's 100% impact on young people. And then couple that with the disruption of education for very valid reason. But still, that is their social scene, that is their way of connecting with the world, and they're separated from it. So we started to think about what could we do to really inspire hope and give them a sense of the future that would be positive. And we built Career Connected Home. We had this idea, and 3 weeks later, we executed on it. And the idea was this: let's expose young people to the amazing things around them by getting employers to kind of stream into homes across the state once a day during the school day to talk about what they do, but also to have younger generation people in these companies tell the story of how they ended up in that job. A lot of times they would pose a challenge or a question, and they would then explore with students how to solve this problem. And sometimes it would be related to COVID. Sometimes it was just something else that they were trying to figure out in their companies. We had an interactive feature in this Career Connected Home session. We had so much employer enthusiasm for this that we were going to do just the month of May, but we had too many employers to squish them all in May. So we ended up doing it all the way through the end of the school year. And that is what was so cool about it. We worked very closely with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction in our state to get the word out. We were very worried that the biggest challenge would be getting anybody to watch it or getting through the noise, because there was so much stuff happening virtually in our state. But they were fantastic at getting out to all the superintendents to all the CTE instructors, the skills centers, et cetera. And I would say the reception on the part of the educators was just overwhelmingly positive. They were so happy to have content, organized content to work with, because in CTE land, I think I see Cassie has a big CTE sign behind her. I know she's in CTE. It's tough to do CTE remotely, and so there was just this kind of going on at that stage, especially. And I think we really helped satisfy, we've helped fill a gap that was happening. So we did stream this every day at 3:30 in the afternoon, but we also recorded them all, and they're on a platform. And if you go look at Career Connected Home, it's all open source. Anybody can use this platform. Anybody can use these videos. And that was very intentional on our part. We wanted to spread the word. Obviously, jobs know no boundaries, especially now. So it doesn't matter if you sit in Washington State. These employers oftentimes are very large and have presence all over the place. So please take advantage of this if you have any needs that might align with this. To keep going, these are some of the companies that participated, and it was everything from technology to sports to public service. I mean, we just tried to cover the gamut. And again, no lack of employer enthusiasm to try to do something to give young people aspiration and hope, and to get them excited about what's around and that will be around post-pandemic. So lots and lots of great engagement. Go for it, another. This was our viewership. So, again, we were really worried we might come up with a big flat zipper in terms of viewership. So we were thrilled that we got over 8,500 views. Obviously, had we had more lead time, that would have been a bigger number. And some of our greatest, most viewed, Zillow, I think everybody knows what Zillow is, got tons of views. For some reason, they talked about how you could actually convert a visit to an apartment or a house into a virtual visit. So they showed the technology they used and did some really interesting examples. Uber was highly popular, and we have a company called Mod Pizza, which, I think it's because high school age kids love pizza. I mean, it's great. But it was a great and diverse set of companies and a great and diverse set of presenters that match the demographics of our state. So that's also obviously very important. Okay. We wanted to make sure we also got not just in Puget Sound, but across the state. You can see that you probably all of you are not that familiar with Washington State, but on the left there is Puget Sound, where Seattle, Tacoma, Everett, and so on is. When you get to Eastern Washington, it's much more rural. So the good news is we did hit all parts of our state, even really pretty far-flung parts of the state tuned in, obviously not at the same level, but it was nice to see that we did penetrate most of the, at least not urban centers, but the even gathered, suburban and smaller centers. So that was exciting to see and a great building block for us. We had almost 20,000 website visits during that 6-week period. So these are some of the positive press feedbacks and, and great comments from teachers and from students. We did try to get a lot of feedback as we went to try to keep improving the model. I think, it was a lovely and well appreciated effort to make these connections for young people to the future. Okay, if we keep going. We do want this to stay up, and we are trying to build across the state a deeper version of it. So I mentioned we have 9 regional networks. Each of them loved this, and we've transported the technology to them so they can do the same thing in a much more regional way. And so they're creating their own versions of this and posting it on the same site. So we hope we'll have just a great data bank of different employers, and they're bucketed, into different industry areas, technology, and advanced manufacturing, et cetera. Okay. I wanted to say, so what do we do next? Obviously, we thought, oh, well, that worked pretty well, considering it was sort of a quick and responsive effort, but not really, super deep in terms of curriculum or academics. So we are now working on something called the State of Innovation Case Challenge. So I will, if you could flip one slide. It is also a virtual, career-connected, problem-solving approach. It is designed for middle schoolers, high schoolers, and out-of-school youth. It can be done in a variety of settings. And it has these 3 goals, which is to really get youth thinking about how they might solve some of our biggest challenges, whether it's climate change, mental health, COVID-19 response, whatever. But these are the things that are on their minds anyway. And then encourage teachers to collaborate with each other as they adapt to this virtual learning environment by creating clusters of teachers interested in doing this work and engaging, our industry folks directly in that virtual classroom and bringing in post-secondary instruction, because our whole goal is to try to make that bridge to the next level of learning. So, our implementation approach is that students will design solutions to challenge prompts and share ideas with state leadership. So there will be opportunities for them to deliver messages right to legislators and the governor and so on. They will have this interactive industry engagement, and they will get post-secondary connection. From a teacher standpoint, this is really designed to help and aid teachers fundamentally. There's going to be a small team of teachers and CTE across the state that really help us with this work, guide our curriculum on it, and also help us create the teaching guides, because we want to, unlike Career Connected Home, which was very quick and very, very, it was kind of a put it out there approach. This time, we're really designing this so that teachers can actually be aiding and abetting this from a classroom setting. So there's toolkits for the teachers that they're helping to create. So that is where we are so far. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in this appendix that I think Heather can make available to all of you. Just giving you snapshots of our website, and I won't go through it all, but it provides you with quite a bit of background for those of you who want to dig in more deeply. And Heather, again, thank you for giving us the opportunity to share this, and I hope some of you might make use of some of the material. It's definitely some pretty fun and interactive opportunities for young people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maude. And absolutely, I think one of the biggest resources here, and I have it up on the screen, is the toolkit that you all created. I mean, one of the biggest bandwidth pieces for communities is just creating the template, creating the form, creating the worksheet. And there's an incredible amount of resources here, especially when it comes to, I know we had a lot of questions about how do you engage employers? What questions are you asking? There's a lot of great kind of vetted resources here that you all use as you made Career Connect at Home a reality. So thank you again for joining today. And I know you have to hop off at 11, but if there's any kind of questions or anything here, Carl, I'm not sure what's in the chat, or if someone would like to ask out loud, we have Maud for a moment here. And I will absolutely share all these resources. There will be an email with a recording and resources. And at the end, we have a whole IWIN website just for ourselves. So I'll show you all that too.
Everyone is just expressing a lot of gratitude for that awesome information sharing. I think Robin did say that she's interested in how she can support our local schools by participating. So excited to think about how this can trickle down to schools. But yeah, thank you so much, Maud.
Well, thanks, Carl, too. And good luck, everybody. I love what you're doing there. It sounds just fantastic all the way around. So hope it works super well for you. And if we can be a resource in any way, just let us know.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maud. And same to you. Hope it all goes well. Excited to hear how it continues to progress. Awesome. I'm going to move here then to our next presenter from GCAMP. So Kathleen Burley should be on the line here with us.
Yep, I'm here.
And they're going to awesome. Hi, Kathleen. Thank you again for joining today. I will leave it to you.
Okay, so I'm going to make this quick because I hear that we are off at 11 o'clock. So I'm going to make this pretty quick.
11:30. 11:30.
Oh,
so
11:30.
we got a little.
Okay, we got a little bit of time. Okay, so GCAMP is in the northwest suburbs. We basically are a connector between area manufacturers and schools, education, and we work with our high schools and our community colleges. I've got a lot of friends on this call today. So one of the things that everything that we've done has always been in person. We've had meetings, breakfast meetings, trying to connect companies with students and getting them firsthand paid internships and such. So obviously when we reached out to educators back in March and April as to how we were going to be able to help support them going forward, it was virtual, virtual, virtual. We need online. We need something that we can help in the classroom. You know, students can't go out onto tours. We're not going to be able to go into schools to do visits as we've done them in the past. So, so working with one of our local high schools, a few of the teachers had this idea, and it speaks to something that I've always said, and that's that students in this generation, they want to see the beginning and end. They want to see the beginning process and they want to see the end result. And so from that, we came up with something we're calling quote to production process. And it is, thank you. It is over 8 weeks long for this semester. This is our very first time trying this. And what we're doing is we approached a company and we asked them for a product that that we were able to take from beginning to end, from the quote process all the way to a finished product, but splitting it up from week to week. So for this, because we started pretty late, and actually you don't want to go any longer than I think 8 weeks for something like this. We have it broke down, as you can see there in the outline. We have it broke down into 8 weeks to where we break down a part from beginning to end. Along the way, we're learning about, in the intro, we're learning about the company. And this company happens to take on interns in the summer, and they also take on apprentices. We learn about the process from beginning to end and the careers that are involved. So in quotation and in sales, talking about technical sales, and then moving into the design process and engineering and logistics, purchasing, all of those different career pathways all the way through. So that we're emphasizing not just advanced manufacturing, but that there's a lot of different careers that all come together for this. It's a problem solution process. So as problems come up, they're able to hear how the company was able to come up with a solution for that. So far, we have done 2 weeks. So we are going to do the third session of this on Friday. They are going to be up on our website. We have not gotten that uploaded yet, but so far, students and the teachers have been very excited about how it's worked out. So because the schools are in block scheduling, we did this with one classroom of 30 students to start with. Down the road, because trying to gauge this to individual classrooms is crazy, but it will be available to all the anybody in any school district anywhere, because we'll put it up on the website so that they're able to access that. You know, when a student is inside a manufacturing lab and they see one part of that process, I think it really is important for them to see the whole thing. And since we can't get them into a factory or into a shop, you know, it really solidifies this is what I want to do, or maybe sales, or maybe engineering, or maybe the engineers. There's a lot of, I think the Project Lead the Way students are, I think the classroom that we're working with now is a Project Lead the Way classroom. But they can see what it's like, the machining side of this and everything else. So, so we're pretty excited. We're hopefully, if this works out as we'd like, to take a different type of a manufacturer and a different process and do the same thing once or twice next semester, depending on time constraints and COVID. But then the benefit of this is the students can, if they're at home, if they're working hybrid model and they can call in from home, they can access it. The teacher asks the questions, and then at the beginning of the next session or within the next session, the questions are answered. So, and they've gotten a lot of dialogue out of this. So if you can flip to the next one. So one of the things that we do with GCAMP is we work with the students on work-based learning experiences or team-based challenges, both. We try to incorporate companies into the process as much as we possibly can. One of the things that touching back on when you were talking about the Power Act, and you were talking about the post-secondary and career expectations. For the Power Act for manufacturing, there's 10 competencies. And one of the things that we've looked at is working with companies to take each competency and doing a 5 or 10 minute video on how and this could be in any pathway, finding out what that looks like to a student, because these are competencies that teachers are going to be teaching in the classroom. So if we've got 10 of those and we can line up at least one video, perhaps 2 for each competency, it gives it a little more interesting to the students, so they get a little more of an idea. I mean, I've read some of these competencies and I'm not really sure where that would factor in, but the manufacturers we can put that together. So that's another virtual something that we can bring them. Normally, we work with schools and companies on internships. Barriers to some of that, just throwing this out there. You know, we're looking into micro internships with the districts. We're working with them on those. Pre-apprenticeship, youth apprenticeships. Is the under 18 rule for manufacturing? That's a big, big problem. So that's something for all of the legislators that might be on here today that we need help with, because if you want the apprenticeships to work, if you want pre-apprenticeships to work, we have to let these kids inside the companies to do that, and get past the front office, because Department of Labor has laid it out that they can, but insurance companies have denied that. So we work with high mileage vehicle competitions. We have robot rumble competitions. There's underwater girls robotic team in Hoffman Estates. They all, the thread there with them working within industry is they do use mentor match. We do try whenever possible to bring in a local, some local mentorships, but generally there's also the mentor match as well. So, so I think that's pretty much all I have. Not as robust as the last speaker, but I'm only one pathway, so, which is big pathway. So, okay.
No, this is incredible, Kathleen. And I had a chance to look at the chat. I don't know if there's questions, but lots of love for what you're doing here. I think that piece of really going from the beginning to the end, like sometimes we start students right at the end and there's no concept of what it meant to build it before. My husband is a photographer, but actually started his career repairing cameras. And I think it's made him a better photographer, right? Really understanding the way that a camera works. I really like the competencies idea too. I think more and more, even just virtually, like it can be hard to read those competency statements and be like, okay, so what does that mean to my course? What does that mean to what I do? And I love that. Any questions? I don't know if they're popping up in the chat, or feel free to unmute yourselves too. And agreed about the under 18 challenge. I mean, it's allowable, but agreed, it's very company by company, and there are a lot of companies who are scared for different reasons to allow it.
It's actually not the companies, it's the insurance companies.
Yeah, yep.
It's the insurance companies. So we need to either legislate it because Department of Labor has said that it's okay, or we need to educate the insurance companies that are not allowing it, or the third would be, and I got this from, trying to remember his name. He's the assistant education secretary under Betsy DeVos, but he had mentioned that there was a state that what they did was they had a list of all of the insurance companies that would work with companies, that would work with manufacturers to insure. And you know, it's kind of like one of those, to an insurance company, do I go with everybody and start covering this, or do I not? I mean, it's not the 80s where, you know, there's so much safety protocol out there, and you're not talking about putting a student on a machine who hasn't already been using a machine at school for a year or two, or a semester at least. We would never do that. But for a student who's been in a program, and that's definitely, that's the number one hurdle that we have to get over when the state is talking about going to apprenticeships. You can't just jump right into an apprenticeship without having a pre-apprenticeship or a student apprenticeship or even an internship. But if you have to wait until they're 18, and many of these students may not until the end of their senior year, you've lost, because you don't have any way to get them in there. Working in QC all the time isn't going to do it, or putting them up in the front office. They need hands-on. So that's one of the things we'll be working on.
This is Tony from GF Machining in Lincolnshire, Illinois. Could I make a statement to that? Our company was hesitant also about doing the internships because of the insurance, as you mentioned. And one of the local high schools, North Chicago High School, got a grant, and the students were paid through a temporary job agency that supplied a certificate of insurance. And our company accepted that as that the student was insured and that we weren't paying the student, and therefore we were clear of anything that may have happened. So if we could get some sort of certificate out to companies, or something like North Chicago High School did, that I know it was a game changer for us. But when it comes to another area is signing an apprenticeship, the apprentices have to sign a legal contract about the cost of the apprenticeship, and if they do not finish the program, what they must pay back. We do not allow apprentices to be under 18 because of that contract, not because of the insurance. But we were allowed to have the intern that did have a certificate of insurance. Does that help any?
Yeah. One of the things that we are working with one school district on is in micro internships, and actually student internship, the youth apprenticeship, sorry, is actually incorporating and bringing in one or two staffing agencies that would hire the student so that the student could work for the company. There are some staffing agencies that have that ability that they will hire on, and I guess their insurance will cover them. It's been a fallacy in the past for some internships that the school district will cover that student, which is not true. That was not going to happen. And then I had one administrator from a district say that, well, the parents' insurance will cover them. Well, you're just opening yourself to all kinds of lawsuits, because that is just not going to happen. I wouldn't let, if my son or daughter got hurt on the job and they said, well, you've got to use your insurance, you know, that's just not how it works. So, so in the meantime, we're trying to find workarounds, which are difficult, but, you know, I can I'll let the group know as we go. We're just we're working on that now. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you, Kathleen. I see a lot of different comments here in the chat. I mean, a piece of this network, as I'm continuing to think through how this evolves and moves along, is we might start to move into kind of some sub-networks, right, where we might be really focused on manufacturing and some of the barriers in there for access. And so I see a lot of different ideas and different spaces to move in here. So we'll definitely keep you all connected, but appreciate you for joining here today, Kathleen.
Thanks.
And all the work that you do. It's very exciting. And so we're going to move now. We have our last but not least presentation here are from some of our colleagues here at Science Olympiad, and they're going to share some updates and also just some great examples of how you can move things from hands-on to virtual and virtual to hands-on, and how you can just continue to keep students engaged in STEM education.
Thanks, Heather. Hi, everybody. If you want, you flip to the slide. Fantastic. For those of you that may not know, I was going to go a little bit about Science Olympiad and kind of talk about how we've been responding and, like Heather said, making connections to work-based learning. As an organization, we're founded in 1984, and the whole point of our organization is to get kids and teachers and professionals excited about STEM learning. And our philosophy is that excellence in STEM education and STEM learning should be as recognized as excellence in athletics. Across the country, we reach about 300,000 students. And we do this through school-based teams, and we're in all 50 states plus the District of Columbia. One really cool thing here for Illinois is that we've been designated a CTSO. So any work around Science Olympiad can approach or can be eligible for Perkins support, whether that takes place at the school level or the community college level. And we have programs for all grades, right? We hit our elementary, we refer to as Division A, and our high school, or middle school and high schools, we refer to Divisions B and C. And what our model has always been is a school-based after-school team competition. The great analogy somebody made years ago when we're starting out to describe it is, think of it like an academic track meet, where schools form teams. They're going to compete in 23 events, and the individuals in the events can win medals based on their performance, and then the aggregate performance of the team gets them team awards and trophies and advancement all the way through. Here in Illinois, they'll start with regional competitions. We hold our state competition at the University of Illinois when we're face-to-face, and then we move on. The top teams there get to move on to the national competition. Now, obviously, in the time of COVID, with in-person, large group in-person events being a particular challenge, we've actually pivoted and really looked at doing more remote events and thinking about ways in which our program can be run remotely. Why don't you go to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about the events, and then we'll get into some of the remote options. So the idea here is when we refer to an event, they're basically partner-based challenges centered around a core STEM field. We organize them into the key content areas plus one for technology and engineering. And the idea is that for every event, 2 kids on the team at least are going to work together to prep for the tournament. When they show up at the tournament, right, they will compete against the other teams. And the things we ask our kids to do vary based on the event, but essentially it comes into really 3 big buckets. When they get to the tournament, they're going to be presented with some data that they are expected to analyze, run some tests, collect some information, and use that to answer questions. Other events require the kids to build something. So you can see we have a picture, looks like there the girls have a design for one of our electric vehicles where they've used CDs, or quite a popular wheel. Or we have events where they just come in and they've learned a bunch of information about a topic area, and they come in and answer questions. And the teams understand what they're supposed to do because every year we release rules which spell out the allowed parameters and kind of the desired outcomes that we expect students to achieve. All right, let's hang on one second. We'll get everyone into a try it in 1 second. But I want to say this year, what we've modified things to is we've really looked at it, and in terms of a remote format, we've looked at the activities and figured out ways that we can actually safely run the activities either in a school setting for people that are in the school building, or even in home settings for students that might be fully remote and doing full distance learning. And I think it provides a key piece as you talk about work-based projects, and something to think about with your partners is, are there pieces of the activity that, while the kids may not be able to get to the industry site, can elements of the industry site be brought into the school to be demonstrated and worked with? And we'll talk about a couple of specific examples here in a second. Now, if we flip to give you a chance to try out a hands-on activity and kind of get a sense of what we're doing. All right, you had 2 minutes to create a structure that's going to hold a heavy object that you have on your desk, be it a stapler, box of Kleenex, hand sanitizer. And the goal is to try and get whatever that heavy object is as far away from your desktop as possible. So what you get is 1 single sheet of paper, right? I would encourage you not to use anything that you worry about breaking or has value to you if it falls, or it'll make a mess. So leave the coffee cups on your desk. And if you would, your design works, please describe it in the chat, and I'll include what you held up. So we'll go a quick clock and give you guys 2 minutes, and I will show you mine as well.
Yeah, hand sanitizer might be a hot commodity now as we move into further restrictions. So also be careful with your hand sanitizer.
Exactly. Well, and I'm sure those things are going to make a mess when they, if they happen to fall and break open.
I do just want to say, while you're all working, just excited to have Science Olympiad here today. I think so often we're always trying to figure out new spaces or new ways to do some team-based challenge or project-based learning. And Science Olympiad, especially now as a CTE student organization, is a great resource for you all. So maybe you already are aware that they exist within your school space, or you're not aware and you want to find out. I think John could definitely help you out here with that. I see your design here, John.
If you would, let's, to keep moving. So here you go. Now it's a little bit higher because it's sitting on my laptop up amongst a bunch of books, but all I've done is taken my wonderful I will actually show that it's a Chicago Bears stapler, even though I don't know that the team's performance on Monday night warrants us even talking about them. But all I did, just a tube of paper, and to make sure it stayed together, put a couple of staples in it. And I wanted you guys to do this as an example of, here we have a little activity that showcases or allows us to then start having a conversation about forces and structures and design and all sorts of things that we can relate to a lot of the basic issues, I think, that you can see across a wide variety of industries. And one of the things that as Science Olympiad we think about in terms of encouraging career exploration is to really get those conversations started and create opportunities for the students to engage with career professionals and do it in such a way that there's like a starting point to the conversation. I believe it's, Heather talked about earlier in one of the slides, this idea of developing the questions. So, from our perspective, one of the big things that we're trying to do is create circumstances that are going to create questions to create those learning connections, while at the same time, because they're doing it in a collaborative team format, the kids are also working on a lot of those cross-sector competencies that are important. If you want, we can move on to the other slide. I saw that Kathy talked about making a shelf. I want you to think about, when you think about this activity, and I probably kind of, jumped ahead too much, but I want you to think about what are some of the key features of the activity, right? What were some of the things, if you tried it, you were trying to do, or some of the questions that were coming up? Because we can jump to the next slide and I'll show you the list of things we think about and what we've found are kind of important when we talk about challenge-based learning. So the sense that in challenge-based learning that there's a meaningful problem. There's something, and by meaningful, there's something that people can really get interested in, right? There's some element of it that captures attention. But also, a meaningful problem, particularly for us, has some element of you're doing something, right? There's some hands-on component that allows kids to be active. There's also this idea that they're going to encounter some barriers and some struggles along the way that they're going to have to overcome. One of the things that we also look at is that there's some open-endedness to it. So ideally, you can create opportunities where there's an open-ended outcome. For us, it's a little bit harder because we actually, at the end, have to have kind of a defined thing to judge because there's that competition element. But if the outcome can't truly be open-ended, you can also look at making the process open-ended, right? As I believe it was Kathleen kind of talked about, helping the kids understand, all right, there's a start and there's an end, but there's a bunch of different ways that middle might look like, and a bunch of different approaches to get from start to end are possible. The other big thing with these challenges, there's collaboration. We kind of talked about the skill set and the career competencies. And we also mentioned this idea that it's going to create conversations, both amongst the kids as well as between the student and adults. And the other cool thing is, I think a lot of these challenges, and especially when you can give the kids choice, allows them to explore interests and allows them to get more involved because they're excited about the topic from the start. All right, we move on to the next slide. All right. So here's one of the things we did in another kind of program we worked on. In addition to shifting our competition to a remote format, we also created a new opportunity for kids to engage with Science Olympiad as individuals. And this is from, and so now we have a monthly program called MySO. And in September, we decided we were going to focus on epidemiology because it seems, one, it's been a longstanding event, and we have a great partner in the Centers for Disease Control who help us with all of our epidemiology work. But also, like, clearly it's an issue that I don't think everybody understands, and we can still all do some collective learning. And as part of the MySO program, we're releasing free lesson plans each month on the topic. And for our lesson plan this month, one of the key activities in it was a contact tracing simulation. And you can see kind of a setup for it where there were 12 cups of milk, and in the cup of milk, in one cup, there's going to be some starch. And what happens as part of the simulation is the contents of each cup are mixed with one another, right? And you have a kind of random mixing process, and then you can use iodine to detect the starch. And what's going to happen is a couple of the cups are going to turn purple. And the idea then is for the students to figure out who patient 0 was and kind of look at the data they collected and track through what, kind of the process. And I think this is one, it's an activity of a much larger lesson plan, but I think in terms of what we've been talking about and kind of some of the challenges we face, it can be adapted either for home or school. So for example, I made the mention of, are there things that you could bring in from industry into the school to do or into the home to do? And I think this idea of contact tracing and epidemiology is one easy one that you can think of. And the idea is it may not represent everything, but it's a basis and it starts that conversation. And if you want to know more, the link to all of our MySO work is up there. October this month was space, and really focusing a lot on astronomy. And for those of you interested in electrical engineering and manufacturing, next month in November, we're turning our attention to circuits and electronics. Then we can go ahead to the next slide. All right. And one other thing I wanted to share with you, because I knew we've been talking about this idea and the challenges of virtual mentoring. And this is one of the things we developed for our coaches and teachers to use. And I'll be honest, I stole this from a thing we had used and learned about when I was with the Chicago Public Schools and involved in a lot of collaborative coaching work with teachers. And this idea of an interaction log, it's just a tool for progress monitoring. But the cool thing about it is it's a written record that forces you to have a conversation between the individual, the mentor and the mentees. And there's really 5 questions that you're looking to answer. Is the first question you always want to talk about is on the given topic, right? What's going well? And you document that in the upper left-hand corner box. In the upper right-hand corner, you have the conversation about what needs to be improved. Then as you get to the lower left, you're going to list out the actions that the students are going to take. Lower right, you talk about actions that the coach will take. And then the other thing you end up doing is you settle on your next interaction date. And the cool thing I think that's powerful about it is you allow it to be, in our case, student driven, but the coach kind of guides it. So it's not like the students are just putting down anything, right? The coach gets to kind of help influence and sometimes can actually challenge and push on, statements on what they're thinking are going well, or, how to adjust the priorities around what needs to be improved. And because you have this, I think one of the challenges, at least for myself in this virtual world, is there's a weird, I've been struggling with this idea of time because so much of everything feels like there's a very sameness to it. It's really hard to believe that we're looking at the start of November here this weekend. And one of the nice things about the log is one creates kind of a record, right? And helps you follow along temporally, but also because we're not there together and we're not having all these check-ins and they may not be on the same regular cadence, it's going to give you a place to put down information and collect information. So you kind of have a sense of where you were and where you're going. And last but not least, the cool thing I think about it is if it's done right over time, things that are showing up in the upper left-hand corner box, those challenges, the things that need to be improved, should start shifting and being things that you can see in the upper left-hand corner and as things that are going well. And again, it provides a motivational tool because, you know, as we get to see problems become solutions or areas of improvement to become strengths, right, that provides an incentive to continue and keep going with this. If we want to go to the next one. All right, just real quick, I want to thank Heather and the Education System Center for including us, and, you know, wish everyone good luck on your school year and what you're trying to do. I know, as Heather talked about, we work with teachers all the time, and it can be a real challenge, and we know no school system has an easy task right now. If you want to look for more resources from us, you can check out our webpage. We also have our YouTube channel with career resources. As part of the MySO, we're doing interviews with career professionals related to the topics and kind of how they got there and kind of what their work looks like. And last but not least, don't hesitate to reach out. We're more than happy to have conversations with you, either myself or my colleague Katrina, to you know, support you guys in your efforts and make connections and help with you know, kind of work-based learning. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much, John. I think this is a really incredible resource as I'm thinking about Science Olympiad and all the different things that you have on your site and through this YouTube channel. If you're thinking about trying to engage employer and partners in your space and maybe even like host a lesson and do some Q&A at the end, there's some kind of great lessons in here that you can connect with on an employer or a partner and say, hey, would you work with me? Let's do this lesson. And if you could share a bit about your career, right? So there's a lot of different options here and a whole breadth of resources. So thank you for that, John, and for Katrina joining today. And I am a former teacher, and so I always overplan just in case you want to overplan rather than underplan when you have a room full of students in front of you. So we don't really have time for these breakout room discussions here, but would love for you, you know, share in the chat or think out loud or think to yourselves, share with your team just about what insights you got today, questions that were brought up for you, how you think you might incorporate these. And I'm also going to launch a poll here just with some questions for different feedback from you all as we think through the next meeting of IWIN. So you can take a second and vote on that as you're kind of webinars are wrapping up here. And just want to share a couple of next steps. I know we have like, it is 11:30 right now. I'll be super quick. There is an IWIN site that has been established and I'll send out to you all. It's going to be a space. If you have a resource, model, or activity that you want to share, you can do that directly to the website or emailing me. There's also different resources, models, and activities, things that are shared here today along the continuum that will be on that site as well. And so I will share that all with you. But really next steps is sending out this recording and materials. If you can submit your responses in this poll here. Awesome, seeing some items come in. And then again, please submit a resource through the site or send it directly to me. If you don't want to deal with the site, I'm happy to upload it directly on there as well. And just thank you all again for joining and really look forward to convening again soon. I hope there was something tangible, something inspirational that you can take away today and apply in your own space. And I know everyone here who has presented is willing and interested in talking to you all about the work that they do and how they might support you. So thank you all again for joining, and we'll see you soon.